Can these talks pave the way for a political solution? Is there a different approach this time around? Let's pose these questions to Theodore Kattouff. He's the former U.S. ambassador to Syria. Ambassador, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Asieh.
The 8th round of UN-sponsored talks in Geneva. What has been accomplished so far? And will anything be different this time around?
Well, what's different this time around is that Syria, Russia, Iran hold the high cards, and the Syrian opposition, although they have a unified delegation, they're quite fractured in their views. And the U.S. are in a very weak position, given the events that have occurred on the ground in the last couple of years in Syria. And now with the defeat of ISIS, there's less rationale for the U.S. to even be there in Syria.
And I wanted to get to Russia, Iran, and Turkey in a moment, but one of the main sticking points at these talks has been the government and the opposition will not even sit at the same table to face each other one-on-one. Do you think that's going to happen? Because the opposition has always said that a prerequisite for sitting down is Assad's departure, and ouster has to be part of the conversation.
Well, the Saudis put together a, quote, unified opposition delegation of about 11 people. And the Russians prevailed upon Saudi Arabia, as I understand it, that the opposition delegation would not insist at the outset, if ever, that Assad go. So right now, that's supposed to be off the table. The two issues they're supposed to be discussing, according to this UN negotiator, de Mistura, is a new constitution and then UN-supervised elections.
What kind of elections are we talking about here, sir? Anything that involves Assad again, or more on a regional, local level?
Well, let us assume for the moment they could agree on a constitution. Assad is not going to step down. He did not fight. He did not kill all these people, commit these war crimes, because he's planning on stepping down. And the Russians and the Iranians are not going to pressure him to step down, quite the contrary. So the opposition is either going to have to, at some point, leave the talks or swallow hard and accept that Assad's going to run for president again in, quote, free and fair elections.
I detect a little sarcasm on your part. How involved is the Trump administration in these talks, and have they sort of backed off, letting Iran and Russia and Turkey sort of lead the way, like we saw in the talks in Kazakhstan, in Astana?
Right. Well, the Russians have hit a roadblock. They had hoped to convene the Syrians and the opposition in Sochi on the Black Sea, of course, in Russia, and the opposition was not accepting that. So the Russians, for now, have been willing to have the talks, the official talks, go on in Geneva, which gives the U.S. Its role. But there's no doubt that the U.S. Is, A, in a weakened position, and B, it's not clear how much the Trump administration really is pushing on these issues.
Or how much of a priority it really is for the Trump administration. Do you believe the talks in Astana, in some aspect, proved to be successful? Because it seems these three countries have a game plan. At least they came up with the so-called de-escalation zone. And from what I understand, they're actually holding. Yeah,
well, yes, the de-escalation zones are largely holding, but Syrian regime forces violate them when it's convenient, as they're doing in the suburbs of Damascus around East Ghouta. But you're absolutely right. The Russians, Turkey is now not talking about replacing Assad. They're very concerned about the Kurds, and they've blocked the Kurdish delegation from going to Geneva yet again, even though the Kurds control about 15 or 20% of Syrian territory.
Wow, complicated story, Ambassador Theodore Kattouff. We certainly appreciate our expertise, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Asieh.